Welcome back to Divine Light. Today we are shifting our perspective entirely. In 720 BCE, the prophet Isaiah described the fall of the most powerful empire on earth. 27 centuries later, that pattern repeated, not in Babylon, but in Berlin. Because Babylon is not just a city, it is the archetype of every civilization that replaces the divine with the state and builds its tower on human intellect alone. The voice of Babylon and the voice of Nazi Germany arose from the same pattern, human intellect severed from its source. That voice is always loud because it must drown out the truth. Today we lay Isaiah's ancient words over the ruins of 1945. The parallels aren't subtle. They are a terrifying proof of a repeating pattern in the soul of history. It is important to note that Isaiah 13 is the first in a series of burden prophecies against specific nations, a sequence spanning chapters 13 through 23. This operating manual of collapse begins with the most powerful empire of the age. Listen to the deepening tone of verse 1.
A prophecy concerning Babylon, which Isaiah, son of Amoz, saw.
The chapter opens with a massa, a burden. Every empire built on arrogance carries the weight of its own inevitable collapse from its first day. The burden isn't placed on the empire at the moment of collapse. It is there from the very first day of its hubris. Looking back at history, the seeds of 1945 were already fully grown in the rhetoric of 1933. Observe the imagery of verse 2.
On a bare mountain, raise the war banner. Call out to them. Signal with your hand so they advance and enter the gates of the nobles.
The choreography of invasion is directed by a divine muster that happens openly for all to see. The target is the gates of the nobles, the visible entrances of imperial power, the seats of prestige. In 1945, that meant the symbolic and political heart of Berlin, where the top-down dismantling of the Nazi hierarchy exposed the total vulnerability of the SS leadership. Consider verse 3.
I have commanded my consecrated ones. I have summoned my mighty warriors to execute my wrath, even my proudly exulting ones.
Invading armies are referred to as consecrated ones, acting as cosmic subcontractors appointed for a specific surgical task. This does not imply they are morally perfect. They are functional instruments summoned by the gravity of history to dismantle absolute evil. In 1945, the Allied forces became these tools, acting as unwitting agents of a higher historical judgment. Listen to the roar described in verse 4.
The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the host of the battle.
Standing with Isaiah as a passenger in this vision, the sound becomes overwhelming, the roar of vast armies and the thunder of nations assembling from every corner of the globe. This is the sound of total war, where the loud human intellect is finally answered by a louder divine thunder. Verse 5 continues the advance.
They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord, and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land.
Forces from the farthest horizons converge on the center of the arrogant empire. In 1945, these weapons of indignation arrived from across the Atlantic and the Siberian East. An empire that expands outward eventually finds the world converging inward against it. Now, notice the shift to the solemn intensity of verse 6.
Howl, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty.
This is the arrival of Yom Hashem, the day of the Lord. The name Shaddai represents the power that sets limits and says, enough. On August 20th, 1944, the German armies in the Falaise Pocket experienced this limit in a collapse so absolute that Adolf Hitler called it the worst day of his life. Verse 7 describes the physical response.
Therefore shall all hands be faint, and every man's heart shall melt.
Hands represent action and authority. When the military structure disintegrated in 1944, the leadership lost its grip on power. The melting heart describes the internal realization that defeat is unavoidable. Before the Battle of Stalingrad in 1943, the heart of the regime was cold and hard with the myth of invincibility. But after that catastrophic defeat, the confidence began to melt away. In verse 8, the panic becomes visible.
And they shall be afraid. Pangs and sorrows shall take hold of them. They shall be in pain as a woman that travaileth. They shall be amazed one at another. Their faces shall be as flames.
Eyewitness accounts from early 1945 describe citizens standing paralyzed in the streets, unable to process the disintegration happening around them. The faces as flames found a chilling, literal fulfillment during the firestorms of Operation Gomorrah in Hamburg, where hurricane-force winds fed the flames and entire districts glowed red through the night. Verse 9 marks what we might call a spiritual D-Day.
Behold, the day of the Lord cometh, cruel both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it.
Shama, or desolation, describes the systemic collapse of political and military authority. Babylon had been the center of a vast system. When it fell, the structure collapsed so completely that it became empty of its former glory. In the final year of the war, the Nazi state effectively ceased to function in this same manner, and the sinners were removed through the Nuremberg trials. Listen to the cosmic blackout of verse 10.
For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine.
Prophecy depicts an artificial universe where the sun is the central ruler and the moon the supporting ministries. During the collapse of the Reich, the firmament went dark, and the destruction was also literal. Ash and smoke from massive air raids turned day into night, hiding the sun and moon from those huddled in the ruins. Verse 11 provides the moral diagnosis.
And I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. And I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible.
The word Tevel refers to the world system radiated by the superpower. The contrast is stark. Nazi Germany dominated much of Europe in 1941, yet in the last months of the Third Reich, the entire political structure was outlawed and dismantled. Divine justice breaks the illusion of absolute power. Verse 12 introduces a pattern interrupt.
I will make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir.
Total war treated life as dross, making human life tragically scarce. In the aftermath of the Holocaust, humanity was forced to rediscover that every individual soul is more precious than gold. This re-establishes the value of the human being over the state. In verse 13, the very foundations move.
Therefore I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger.
The geopolitical shaking at the war's end changed the map forever. For those in the German cities, the earth buckled, and the heavens trembled under the relentless Allied and Soviet bombardments of 1945. Verse 14 shows the resulting chaos.
And it shall be as the chased roe, and as a sheep that no man taketh up. They shall every man turn to his own people, and flee every one into his own land.
As the leadership withdrew into bunkers, the population became shepherdless sheep. Millions of foreign forced labourers, specifically the Ostarbeiter, fled the collapsing centre, trying to return to their own lands before the trap closed forever. Verse 15 is a harsh reality.
Everyone that is found shall be thrust through, and everyone that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword.
In early 1945, as the Soviet Red Army advanced into eastern Germany, this verse found a terrifying historical echo. After years of the most brutal war in human history on the Eastern Front, the collapse produced absolute chaos. Those who tied their fate to the regime's brutality found that there was no escape from the harvest of revenge they had planted. Consider the gravity of verse 16.
Their children also shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses shall be spoiled, and their wives ravished.
This is one of the darkest verses in the chapter, and history offers dark echoes. The anonymous diary published as a woman in Berlin provides a harrowing record of the Soviet capture of the city in April and May 1945. It describes a systematic neighbourhood-by-neighbourhood collapse of civil authority where huddling in damp basements provided no protection from the plunder and violation occurring above. In verse 17 we see the unstoppable eastern force.
Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it.
In Isaiah's time, the Medes represented the relentless eastern armies that would shatter Babylon. In 1945, the eastern force that broke the Reich was the Red Army advancing from the Soviet Union. Like the Medes, they were a force that literally could not be swayed or bribed. No hoard of gold the Reich offered could halt their drive toward Berlin. Verse 18 continues.
Their bows also shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eye shall not spare children.
Ancient bows are replaced by 20th century steel. Refugee archives from the final battles preserve the voices of those who saw children caught in the confusion of retreat or shot by advancing units. It was the total removal of pity in the face of accumulated rage. Look at the startling imagery of verse 19.
And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah.
Babylon was the Manhattan of the ancient world, defined by extraordinary wealth. Nazi architect Albert Speer planned a similar glory for Germania. Instead, the scorched remains of 1945 Berlin resembled the catastrophic devastation of Sodom, a landscape of melted stone and skeletal rubble. Verse 20 pronounces a finality.
It shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation. Neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their fold there.
Historically, ancient Babylon did not vanish overnight. It took roughly 1,700 years to become the fully uninhabited ruin it is today. While the physical city of Berlin was eventually rebuilt, the Germany of this prophecy, the imperial hegemon and center of a world of domination, is gone forever. The capital was totally destroyed, the ideology vanished, and the site became a symbolic ruin. It will never again be inhabited by that specific spirit of dominance. Finally, consider the closing vision of verses 21 and 22.
But wild beasts of the desert shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures, and ostriches shall dwell there, and satyrs shall dance there. And the wild beasts of the islands shall cry in their desolate houses, and dragons in their pleasant palaces. And her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged.
This imagery depicts nature reclaiming a civilization that once seemed invincible. The doleful creatures symbolize the eerie, irrational silence that follows the death of a loud, arrogant ideology. In the aftermath of 1945, the boundary between the city and the wild was completely erased. Eyewitnesses recorded animals from the Berlin Zoo wandering through the ruins of the Tiergarten where elite galas once took place. When the time of the wicked expires, their monuments are surrendered back to nature, leaving the stone and steel to the jackals. Isaiah 13 reveals that any system that divorces the intellect from its divine source initiates its own expiration date. History is a directed process where the husks of darkness must be removed to allow a higher light to emerge. The fall of an oppressive power is not a tragic accident, but the necessary clearing of the ground from human arrogance. And the pattern is always the same. Pride rises, power concentrates, violence spreads, nations gather, empires fall. Isaiah wrote these words 27 centuries ago. History keeps proving that the architecture of collapse does not change.